Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I am Natalie Briscoe, and I'm coming to you from the Southern Region. The Southern Region field staff for our Unitarian Universalist Association. I live in Austin, Texas. I hold the youth and young adult portfolio on the team. what Southern Region indeed. I'm excited to be here again with you as part of our youth ministry training series. Kim?
Hi, everybody. I'm Kim Sweeney. I am coming to you from the New England region, where I am the lead for faith formation and safe congregations. And I, too, am happy to rejoin you all. New England is very cool in a different way than the Southern region, but there's no competition here. Natalie and I have had a great time working on this webinar together, and we're so thankful to Angela Kelly from the UU College of Social Justice, who will be doing tech support for us today. All right, Natalie, let's get started with an opening, shall we? I have some opening words for you this afternoon from Jennifer McLaughlin. She's a DRE at Sunny Hill UU Church of the South Hills in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She says, as the first hint of green begins to peek through the barren ground, as that little sprig grows into a healthy stem, as that stem grows into a stalk and forms a bud, as that bud slowly opens with each new day to form a yellow daffodil, let us be like that first hint of green, renewed by the warmth of the sun's rays and ready to emerge with a new energy, ready to face the day. We light this chalice to bring a glimmer of that warmth into our space. I hope that you all have a chalice nearby you while we do this holy work on a webinar. All right. So now, if you haven't done it already, if you could just take a moment to introduce yourselves in the chat and let us know if you have folks watching with you. I know many congregations, their staff get together and watch these every month. Please just let us know where you're from, what your role is, and please do let us know if you have other people joining you today.
So thank you again for joining us for today's youth ministry webinar. This is the 8th youth ministry training webinar in our series this year. All of these trainings are rooted in the youth ministry competencies, which you can find on the UUA website. In the other webinars, you'll find information about building multicultural youth groups, supporting youth of color, building safe and inclusive youth groups, pastoral care to and with youth, and many other topics that will help you create vibrant, healthy, and relevant youth ministry in your own congregation. This webinar focuses on the competency of understanding and using major models of youth ministry in a congregational context. Now, I just want to take a brief moment to let you know of a change. We've decided, in light of recent and ever-evolving events at our UUA, to cancel our webinar for tomorrow evening in order to support the work of the Black Lives of UU Collective. Tomorrow evening, there will be a training session for the White Supremacy Teach-In, which will be happening on April 30th and May 7th in more than 250 congregations across the United States. So you can Google UUA Black Lives of UU, and the website will come up, and you can sign up to be a part of the teach-in and get access to the webinar tomorrow evening for that support. All of these webinars that we're doing, the youth ministry training webinars in this series, have been recorded and are available to you on the Blue Boat blog, which is blueboat.blogs.uua.org/youth. Or you can just go to Google and type in UUA Blue Boat, and it'll come right up. This webinar will be available on the website in short order right after this, since we're not going to be doing the second one tomorrow night. On today's webinar, we'll cover a few models in detail that you can see there on your screen. We hope that this is just the beginning of our talking about this. Your field staff, like Kim and I, and the entire Office of the Youth and Young Adult Ministries at our UUA is certainly available as a coach and a resource for you and your congregation as you explore what model works best for your particular parameters. And with that, Kim is going to get us started with small group ministry.
Thanks, Natalie. So I know many congregations offer small group ministry for the adult members, and we're going to talk a little bit today about using small group ministry with your youth. This can be especially helpful when you have a small number of youth in your youth group. Instead of having, I know many of our smaller congregations have 3 youth that come regularly instead of 83. But small group ministry can be a way to help individuals build relationships and experience a greater sense of belonging. It helps people to feel really supported in their spiritual journey, which is what we aim to do in our youth ministry. At the heart of healthy congregations and really the world, we find that people need strong relationships. They need to be engaged with meaningful issues. They need some sort of leadership development and inspired action. And small group ministry contains all 4 of these elements. Some congregations are using theme-based ministry, and they're finding that the small groups can reinforce and further connect people to the monthly theme. Can we get the next slide, Natalie? Thanks. We can ask what makes a small group a ministry group, and the answer really lies in the name itself. So small in this sense means a group with a maximum of 8 to 10 people. So if you have a larger youth group, you might consider forming multiple small groups instead of just one. With the smaller group of 8 to 10, that size can provide a real opportunity to relate on an intentional level in ways that larger group interactions cannot. You might consider establishing a small group ministry specifically for youth if your congregation is currently running a small group ministry program. So you could do this in conjunction with the adult small group ministry that's already been going on maybe for decades. And if that is the case, then your small group ministry leadership team and the religious educator should decide if the youth small group ministry will follow all the same procedures as your current small groups, or if some adaptations are needed for including youth. Facilitators for youth small group ministry will need the same training and support as other small group ministry facilitators. So it would be a great opportunity at the beginning of the year when people are training facilitators for the adult small groups to include the leaders of the youth small group ministries as well. People might find that in dealing with youth doing small group ministry, participation might be a little bit more fluid than in the adult small group ministry, and that's just because we know that our youth have just schedules that I don't even want to look at. They're just intense. They're at a period of their life where it's just intense. So as with the adult small group ministry, before creating small groups for youth, you want to give thought to the size of the group, safety, confidentiality, and shared facilitation. In all of these areas, there are considerations that are really specific to youth and are different from the adult small groups that you might be used to. So first would be the size of the group. Because of the importance of keeping these groups small, you might need to split up members of your youth group, and that might be stressful for some of your youth who don't want to be separated from their friends. So that is something to take significant care with. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the safety element. A small group ministry program should follow the safety policies of your congregation. That might include having a safe space for your meeting, the required presence of 2 or more adult advisors who have had appropriate background checks and signed a code of ethics, and that they know the mandated reporting of harassment and abuse. Which leaves us a bit to confidentiality. So in most states, as we know, religious educators or RE teachers or youth advisors or leaders are mandated reporters. It's different in every state. So if you haven't already looked up if you are a mandated reporter, this would be not this second, but later would be a great time. So if you are a mandated reporter, if you're aware of a situation where a child or youth is being abused, or if they disclose that in your small group ministry, then you are mandated to report it. So make sure that your youth know that and be aware of your state's laws. And then the last piece that I just want to point out is shared facilitation. So in youth ministry, this opportunity to build youth leadership through shared facilitation of small groups is really valuable, and it's not an opportunity to be wasted. You should plan well in advance how you will incorporate youth into the facilitation role. Many youth will make perfect, amazing facilitators, but you're going to have to provide them with adequate support so that they can do this well. All right, I think we're going to move on from small group ministry. And I should just point out, if Natalie didn't already mention this, we're going to provide a resource list at the end of this webinar with links to virtually everything that we're talking about, so you can go in depth more on uua.org. So I'm going to talk really briefly about the traditional model, the traditional classroom model of religious education in working with youth, specifically for high school youth. And I want to actually go over 5 different programs that are available to us at this moment. And they all vary in terms of sessions and length of time and your commitment. So one of our Tapestry of Faith programs, which are our curricula that are available for free and can be downloaded on uua.org, is the Place of Wholeness curriculum. And this curriculum has 12 different workshops focusing mainly on UU identity. So it explores our UU roots of hope, love, and faith, and our roots of tolerance, reason, and freedom. And so this is a 12-session program. In theory, you could do one a month if that's how often you were to meet, or you could do it in a more condensed version. Our virtue ethics curriculum is also 12 separate workshops. It talks about how our brain makes decisions. It explores virtues, the importance of how these virtues play out in our lives, and how they might develop more fully. This curriculum uses both hypothetical dilemmas and real-life challenges that our youth are facing every day. One of our shorter curricula is the A Chorus of Faiths curriculum, which is only 8 sessions, and it is focused on interfaith youth leadership. It explores our UU interfaith history, which is wide and varied. It creates, each youth will create their own interfaith story and plan an interfaith service project. This has been developed in collaboration with the Interfaith Youth Corps, of which Ibu Patel, if you are aware of his work, is a part of. It's a really valuable curriculum. If you have a group of youth who are so into poetry, and you might, there's the Exploring Our Values Through Poetry curriculum, and it's 15 workshops. And again, you don't need to use all of them, but they are all available to you for download. This curriculum uses poetry to explore spirituality and values. And it uses poetry to explore themes such as beauty, connection to nature, finding our mission in life, humor, and transformation. And at the end, it actually includes steps to plan and implement a poetry slam if your youth are so inclined. But it's also a great way to connect them to a spiritual practice. And there's actually one more curriculum that I wanted to share with you that I did not put on the slide. So I will send you the link, but it's not on the slide because it's really quite new. It's the Be the Change curriculum, which gives our UU youth a starting place for discussions about the role of race, identity, and justice in living out their faith. It's a 6-session program. Each session is 90 minutes long, and it can be used by groups of different sizes. And I can't think of anything more timely at this moment. It seems like it would be a great resource for your youth. And again, I will supply the link for that after this webinar. All right, Natalie, it's you.
Okay, thank you so much, Kim. I am having just a little bit of technical difficulty flipping the slides, as you can tell. Sometimes they get a little bit away from me, but we'll work through it today. That's the afternoon webinar for you. You just never know what's going to happen. Exciting. I'd like to talk to you a little bit now about mentorship as a basis for a youth program or a youth group in your congregation. I really believe that mentorship is a key factor in congregations that we often miss, not just for youth, but everyone in the congregation can benefit from a mentoring relationship. It can deepen our faith in a way that we've never, many of us have never had the opportunity to encounter before. So mentorship asks us to stop thinking about the congregation as a set of building blocks. So the youth building block is over here, and the adult worship is over here, and fellowship is down the street, and music is down the hall. And rather, it asks us to look at the congregation in terms of an intertwining network of relationships that weave together to form a rich tapestry that binds each to its own within our own communities. We also know that it's meaningful relationships with adults who aren't their parents that help youth connect to the congregation, to the community, to our Unitarian Universalist faith, and keep them engaged, keep them involved, keep them on a path of faith development and deepening. Mentorship is the most direct way to foster those crucial, critical relationships in our congregation. So of course, mentorship can be an add-on to a program as well. Kim is going to talk to you later about the Coming of Age program. Coming of Age often has a mentorship component to it, wherein a youth is paired with an older person in the congregation, someone who has more experience. But like Kim was saying with the small group ministry, you can also, if you have just those 3 youth, which seems to be somehow a magic number, that you can, rather than trying to get what we all call that critical mass, where we all have to be in the same room together at the same time to make any kind of programming happen, to make any kind of relationships happen, instead you can start with mentorship as the basis of that program, and then gather your mentoring pairs together in a group periodically throughout the year, so that then that forms a cohesive, larger group that focuses on the faith development of the youth, and you aren't so relying upon, oh my gosh, I hope Samuel isn't on vacation this week because we won't be able to do our lesson because there will only be one person. So starting a mentorship community for youth obviously differs depending on what the parameters and needs of your congregation and your community are. So how many youth do you have? How many adults, willing adults, do you have? Each youth will need to be paired with someone who is at least one generation older in it, or one generation their senior. So when I say one generation, I mean at least 7 to 10 years older than them, preferably significantly more. I would say 10 to 15, but the official guidelines are that 7 years is an adequate definition. That's why, as an aside, we always recommend, for safety guidelines and for appropriate boundaries, that a youth advisor must be 25 years of age or older, because it separates the friendship relationship from the advisor or mentor relationship. And that's very, very important in both of those cases. So when you're recruiting mentors, it's important to not just think of, oh, well, I need this person, I need this many slots, or there's this many youth, so I need this many adults. It's important to know your youth, to know what their interests are, to know what they are, where they are theologically, and then pair them with adults who have similar interests, hopefully, who have similar experiences. Maybe look at the career goals of youth and the careers of the adults. And then, of course, a good theological fit. Now I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that I would recommend that mentors all spend a majority of their time residing in Fowler's stage 5, which is conjunctive faith. We don't want a youth who is on a journey of exploration to encounter an adult who needs to be right. So it's really important that that the adult understands their place in the relationship, and part of that is theological maturity and theological depth. So once you find and recruit your mentors and pair them with the mentees, then it will obviously be important to train and support your mentors. So I recommend keeping in touch with the relationships. I recommend putting the mentors in a small group ministry of their own that's led by the mentor coordinator. Not only does that allow you to make adjustments throughout the year, but it also allows you to get the mentors' spiritual needs met in their own group so that they don't rely on the mentoring relationship to do that. Providing that space for them to process, decompress, for themselves to deepen their faith is critical and super, super important. So the training aspect, we certainly want to talk about their depth of Unitarian Universalism, how they can be great examples of adult use for these youth that they're mentoring, how they can continue forward on their faith journey. But also, and of course, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about safety. Safety is one of the biggest concerns in a mentoring relationship because it is intimate. It's a more intimate relationship than a group relationship. So of course you want to make sure that your meetings are held in public spaces, either in the church with the door open, in the fellowship hall, or in a public place like a coffee shop. Parents, caregivers, and guardians of the youth should be apprised of all conversations that deal with planning the events, planning the get-togethers, planning being together, so that there's no surprises whatsoever. Parents should also be involved in knowing this is when we're going to talk and this is the content of that conversation. Now, you don't need to know all of the nitty-gritty details. You don't need to know that the youth checked in, that they're in a fight with their caregivers or whatever it is, but the conversations are still privileged and yet not confidential. So we need to make sure that we maintain those boundaries. So when we're selecting mentors, when we are recruiting, we also want to make sure that we select people who have reliably demonstrated those good boundaries with children and youth, know that they have primary responsibility over the relationship, and know how to set appropriate and safe boundaries. So we want to recruit appropriate mentors. We want to support them in their spiritual development. We want to train them to make sure that they know guidelines, safety issues, as well as going deeper into their faith. And then we've got these amazing mentoring networks throughout our throughout our congregations. And then what do? So a great place to go for conversation topics are the Soul to Soul and Heart to Heart series that are available at the UUA bookstore. These are books that have 14 discussion starters each in them that help a group, a small group, or a pair really delve into the spiritual aspects of their lives, how Unitarian Universalism is at work, how they bring more love into the world. You can use just about anything, though, for a curriculum for a mentoring relationship. You can use all of the tapestry programs that Kim mentioned. You can use any small group ministry. You can use books, other books, television, movies, music, anything that is inspiring and useful, and as always, bringing it back to how is Unitarian Universalism at work in our lives, and how can we be co-creators of Unitarian Universalism through this third thing, this medium that we've approached. You can structure your mentoring program in many different ways, and that's really the high point of the mentoring program, is that it's so flexible. So you don't necessarily need to make sure that there's no other meeting going on in your church room, because you don't have to meet on site. You don't have to meet on Sundays. You don't have to meet on a set schedule. The mentor and the mentee can set that up themselves, and then as the coordinator, you check in with the pairs and make sure that everything is going fine, smoothly. Do they need any support in that? And so opening up the curricula into the realm of just about anything leads us also to project-based youth groups. Project-based learning is the idea that we gain knowledge and skills by working for an extended period of time to investigate and respond to an authentic, engaging, and complex question, problem, or challenge. So it usually includes a topic that is approached through multiple learning styles, which are covered in another webinar, and opportunities to create and process as a group as well as individuals. So by taking project-based learning into the congregation, youth ministry can become a deep, focused, pardon me, exploration of Unitarian theology, Unitarian Universalist theology and covenant that is guided by an authentic questioning and seeking of the youth. It can also draw in and incorporate hobbies and interests for the youth as the group discovers the limitless facets of whatever theological issue they've chosen to embark upon. As an example, a common example, a youth group might decide that they experience their spirituality through music. So a beginning exploration could take them on a musical tour of Unitarian Universalism and Unitarian Universalist worship. They might look into the hymnal, research its inception. They might collect songs from other sources that they find spiritual. They can create worship services, meditations, study guides from these collections. They might make a connection between music and the visual arts and create something together or separately as a spiritual practice. They may discover a connection between music and scripture and collect music that uses words, holy words from around the world, and then they may become interested in learning about those world religions and how they inform Unitarian Universalism. They may go so far as to write new songs or write a new hymnal for the congregation that they're in. They may put together a coffee house or a concert. They may find all of the ways in which that particular congregation lifts up and celebrates and finds spirituality through music. You can quickly see how deep an exploration of Unitarian Universalism can become through a targeted project that lasts for a significant amount of time. Now, it helps to do the discernment work of deciding on a project in concert with adult advisors, so they can guide the questions and the project ideas towards something that is accomplishable and supports and encourages youth leadership. The concept of youth advisor relations and empowering youth leadership are covered more fully in other webinars in this series, but I'll just mention that a good youth advisor knows how to encourage a youth's exploration of theology in a context that's relevant and important to them and empowers them to take that on themselves. You'll also probably involve other members of the congregation in these projects who the youth may not have had contact with previously, and what a wonderful way to continue to foster those cross-generational bonds. Project-based youth groups should also be always in line with the ministry and mission of the congregation as a whole, and the discovery may even lead the group toward a large-scale justice effort that helps the congregation live into its mission and provide space for youth-led opportunities for all ages. Project-based youth groups are also not confined to the youth room or Sunday morning, just as the mentorship model was. Outings and alternative meeting times fit well with this model, which leads us into the next section, which is rotation and combination of models. So this is a really brief just to mention that not one of these models is mutually exclusive. Once you pick one, it's not what you have to do forever. You can try something for 6 months or a year and then change it up. You can even cherry pick parts of each model that you like and use them all together to create your holistic youth program that best fits your needs. in addition to using a combination, you can also rotate formats. So maybe one, if you're meeting on Sunday evenings, maybe one is a small group ministry session, one is a curriculum session. One Sunday you decide to go worship with the congregation, and on the fourth week you do a justice making effort or a service to the community, and then you begin again. I really encourage you with all of these models, and with especially if you're mixing it up with a rotation or a combination model, to think outside of Sunday morning. Not only will thinking outside of Sunday morning help your scheduling efforts in that, like Kim said, sometimes it's really, really hard to get youth who have band competitions and part-time jobs and all of the things that they do over the weekend together on a Sunday morning. So evenings, weekend-long outings, those kinds of things are great alternatives. And then finally, a rotation or a combination model can also work in concert with other congregations in your geographic cluster. So are there other congregations within a drivable distance to you, a reasonable drivable distance, I would say, that you could partner with to realize some of the longer term or broader scale projects that your youth would like to engage in? This clustering model and relying on each other works really well when there are small youth groups and you can get together and feel the power of being together in a larger group. And also more in-depth programs like the ones that Kim is going to talk to us about in next.
So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about coming of age, which for many of our congregations is the rite of passage for our youth, our high school aged youth. The book on the left is the Coming of Age Handbook for Congregations, which has been out for some time. It has 31 optional workshops in it. I think most of our congregations probably pare that down to, I'm seeing some people try to do this in a half a year, but even in a full year, 31 workshops may or may not work for you, so you can make some choices there. But the premise of Coming of Age is it's a program that is designed to assist our youth in examining their role in their own faith formation. So this is a resource really to help you create your own program. There are workshops on topics like spiritual practices, social justice, theology, community building. And it also, by the way, includes a small group ministry program for parents and caregivers to participate in concurrently while their youth are going through this coming of age program. One of the traits of a coming of age program, youth have a mentor, which Natalie talked about. With the coming of age, I think there's one difference between the coming of age program and just general mentoring. So with a coming of age program, I would highly suggest that the mentors in youth meet together on a scheduled time, so that if you have 10, I'm making up a number here, if you have 10 sessions where you want the mentors and youth to be talking to each other, they all do that on the same days, instead of having youth and mentors trying to work that out on their own. What is often the case is that you'll have 5 youth whose mentors are available to see them 25 times throughout the year to talk in depth, and you'll have 5 youth whose mentors were able to see them twice, which creates a very different coming of age experience for your youth. So anytime you can sort of level the playing field and make it be common, that would be helpful. This also is an opportunity for our youth to really discern what they believe now, knowing that what we believe can change over time. But one of the features of this program is the development of a credo statement, which is usually shared in front of the congregation in a special worship service. I think there are also opportunities to be inclusive of different learning styles, and what they want to share with their congregation might be a piece of art. It might be a song. It could be anything. It shouldn't have to be just the written words. I think there are many ways our youth might be able to convey their beliefs with us, and we should follow their lead on how they want to do that well. The book on the right is brand spanking new. It just came out last month. It's called To This I Give My Heart. And this is a coming of age journal. So this journal is specifically, it was designed for 9th graders. However, you can use it with older or younger youth with some adaptations. This journal is organized into 8 sections. They're Who Are You? UU History, UU Theology, Spirituality and Worship, Community, Leadership, Justice, and Credo. And these sections align with the workshops that are in the Coming of Age Handbook on the other side. So they can be used concurrently. It's meant to be reminiscent of the planners that youth receive in school. Every page has an inspiring quote and questions and activities. So I can say that for my own daughter, who's not in a coming of age program, she is doing this as a self-study at home. And so if you only have one youth, or for whatever reason, if you don't have youth who can commit to a coming of age program, this is not meant to be used alone, but it's better than nothing if that's what you're dealing with. So it's a both and situation. All right, we can go to the next one, Natalie. We get to talk about everybody's favorite, OWL, Our Whole Lives. So the value of our whole lives are self-worth, sexual health, responsibility, justice, and inclusivity. This curriculum, as you may know, is co-written, co-authored by the UUA and our siblings in faith, the United Church of Christ, sorry. Some of our youth have experienced OWL on multiple age groups before they hit high school. What is commonly said to me is, we've already done OWL before. Why do we have to do it in 9th through 12th grade? Like, we already learned that 2 years ago. And what I will tell you is that youth take in the information that is relevant to them at that time, and they let go of all of the rest. So in 7th grade, when I received sexuality education, let me just tell you that part about menopause, I did not listen to, because that had no bearing on my life. I would appreciate taking adult OWL within the next few years so I could learn about something a little bit more relevant to my life. These OWL models teach caring, compassion, respect, justice, and it really helps our high school aged youth to address their attitudes and values and their feelings about themselves and their sexuality. It also helps them talk about their attitudes towards the sexuality of others. Participants in this curriculum are generally in grades 10 through 12, and they need to be guided by trained facilitators through a really engaging curriculum that addresses topics typically excluded from the sex ed that they'll receive in school. This is not the kind of curriculum that you can pick and choose from. It's an all or nothing curriculum, and it is a commitment. It is a little bit adaptable, but they have 14 sessions, including 41 workshops. Now, before you freak out about the 41, some of these sessions are only 25 minutes long, 25 minutes to an hour. So you can do multiple workshops in one gathering. I know some people will do intensive weekend long sort of conference on chunks of this throughout the year. This is the curriculum that many youth have reported back as saying was life-saving for them. It might be the first or only place where they can be honest about their own sexuality and their feelings in a way that is supportive and grounded in faith. It might be the only place that they can do that. It might not be safe to have those conversations at home or at school or in any other aspect of their lives. So for many of our youth, OWL has been a real lifeline. And I have just a quick testimonial from a former participant in high school OWL. Her name is Meg, and she's from Vermont. and she's a young adult now. She said, when I took OWL at age 15, issues like herpes, emergency contraception, and responsible sexual decisions often seemed remote to the point of irrelevance. And I can't deny that my high school health class served as somewhat of a necessary refresher. However, what I really absorbed from OWL at the time, and what I have carried with me ever since, is an outlook on sexuality that was strikingly absent from my sex ed unit in health class. OWL taught me that sexuality is not something to be ashamed of, to be hidden or feared. It is something to be questioned and explored, respected and protected. It is nuanced and complex and sometimes infuriatingly confusing. Most of all, it's an essential part of a human experience that lasts from birth until death, literally our whole lives. So am I bitter that I had to get up at 9 a.m. every Sunday for a year? Yes. Am I glad that my parents made me do it? Absolutely. Thank you, Meg, for the testimonial. All right. I think there's another slide for OWL. So the high school and the adult levels of our whole lives are really the easiest to schedule. This word cloud that you're seeing, these are the topics of all of the many workshops that are included. They can be broken down into shorter standalone activities and discussions, and there's also a parent orientation. My dream is to see our high school youth going through OWL while their parents go through adult OWL concurrently. I can't imagine what the conversations at the dinner table would be if that were to happen. So dream with me and somebody make it happen and let me know. All right, and now we're going to move on to adaptive models.
I would also love to see that. It just, I never thought of that before, but that would be fantastic. I'm also thinking that I have a 5-year-old who I'm hoping is going to do kindergarten OWL coming up, and I really hope that I could use a refresher. It was a long time ago that I had OWL myself. So all of the things that we've been talking about today, all of the programs, the different models of youth ministry, all of the different ways in which we can do that in our congregation, what we've actually been talking about is technical issues. So this is a thing you can do, here's a curriculum you can have, and we'd like to spend the last little bit of this webinar talking about adaptive issues in our congregation with regard to youth ministry and models of youth ministry. As always, it is the goal of youth ministry to have youth fully integrated into congregational life. My favorite phrase that we as a youth roundtable kick around a lot is that youth ministry should be a way into the congregation, not a way out. So it shouldn't be the way that youth escape our large-scale worship. It shouldn't be the way that they get out of having relationships with us. It should be a road in. It should be an open door into all of the amazing things that Unitarian Universalism has to offer in our lives. So this model that I'm showing you right now, this is my model of lifespan faith development within a congregation. And it rests on the idea that there's not a person in your congregation, no matter what age, that doesn't need to experience all aspects of religious life. So we all need worship. We all need fellowship. We all need time for discernment. We all need the ability to create meaningful justice in the world. We all need to learn through religious education classes. We all need small group ministry, and we all need to be supported in our own spiritual practices that get us deeper into our own faith. The usual model, of course, is that adults go to worship and children and youth go to either youth group or religious education, and we don't really think about having a full religious life for all ages. We don't think about the ways in which we can come together as a whole community and not a fragmented one through the offerings of our church. Now, before anybody rises up in the chat and starts screaming at me, yes, I absolutely believe that whole congregations should worship together. Yes, I absolutely recommend that there are fellowship and learning opportunities that are multi-generational, that we learn and grow together. We have so much to teach each other. And when we don't have children and youth with us, at least some of the time, we forget the reason why we're there. We forget about being part of this life cycle. We forget how much we have to learn from the people who are so close to the universe, that we get to glimpse it through their eyes. And of course, I am also absolutely an advocate for cohort-specific learning, cohort-specific processing as well. The trick in a congregational context is to strike a balance between the two, so that we have opportunities to be together as a whole community, and we have opportunities to be with our cohorts, however those cohorts are defined, age or otherwise. So in this model, the larger the bar, the wider it is, the longer along the x-axis it is, the larger the scope of information that it encompasses. So obviously worship will encompass the largest amount of information. It's the point at which we come together as a community to touch what is holy and to lift up our greatest values. The y-axis going down is the depth of processing. So as we go deeper and deeper, further down in this model, we ourselves are transformed by the work that we're engaging in. We get deeper and deeper into our relationships with each other and our relationship with Unitarian Universalism. So worship is obviously the largest scope. Then normally people will have a process of discernment, wherein we say, these values were lifted up in this worship, in this community. How do my personal values align with that I just saw lifted up? Then often there is fellowship in a congregation, coffee hour, potlucks, anything that we do just for fun, just to be together, just to be in community with no other agenda than to have relationships. Normally, a congregation will also have a social action committee or participate in some event during the year. Many congregations have religious education classes, and I differentiate religious education class in the blue bar from a lifespan faith development model. When I'm saying class, RE class, what I really mean is the structured learning experience that we provide, and obviously that can be for all ages. And then continuing to go down in this narrowing our scope of information, our focus, small groups, and then it centers around our own spiritual practice that we have at home, that which gets us personally in touch with what we feel is holy. So now that we're about halfway down the depth of processing, we start to widen our scope of information. And you'll notice that the bars are the same color, but the words have changed. And it's not because anything is different happening at this level. All of the programs are the same. So the blue bars are the same, the dark blue bars are the same religious education classes, the light blue bars are the same small groups, the green bars are the same justice making aspects, the yellow bars are the same fellowship opportunities. And yet, because we have experienced these other things in the congregation, we approach them differently. We're different. So they come to us in a different way. So through small groups, we experience a commitment to our covenants, being with one another. Through our religious education classes, we get jazzed about Unitarian Universalism, and we just want to tell everybody all of the exciting things that we found out. rather than doing social justice because we think we should, we have a deep commitment to justice making and witness that flows out of our sense of who we are, and as co-creators of Unitarian Universalism and peace and justice in this world. And through fellowship, we get an idea of authentic relationship. And really, this is the idea that we can have relationships with people that we would not have approached on the street. This is especially important for multi-generational aspects, as we don't often get a chance to be with people who aren't our own generation. And it's such a miss in the world today. It's just how the world is set up, but we can change that in congregations. And then, of course, through all of this, we'll always return to that discernment, that reflection of our own actions and values, wherein we return to worship in the larger context, to be with one another, to lift up where we are, who we are, our deepest values, and then you start all over again. So this is just to say, this is a cultural model of a youth ministry in the context of the congregation. We can take it into the technical by employing all of these models or pieces of these models or combinations of these models that we're talking about. But the thing that it lies on my heart when we talk about youth ministry is, how do we equip youth with the relationships in a multi-generational context that they need to survive and thrive in the world? How do we support their ministry out in the world? How do we encourage their leadership in the congregation? How do we make sure that we know, recognize, and claim them as part of us, rather than othering them in a silo and focusing just on youth ministry that happens over there?
And I just want to affirm that many of us have come out of an older model of youth ministry. Some of us still have 1 foot in, 1 foot out, where youth were completely separated from the congregation. In many times meeting in space when the rest of the congregation wasn't even in the building, like on Sunday night. And I just want to say that there is no right way for a youth to be a part of a congregation. We are all different people, and we all are attracted to different things. And if you have youth who don't like youth group, that's okay. Find another avenue, find another way to plug them in. If the way that this youth wants to participate is through your social action or your justice making, that's fantastic. I feel like we oftentimes assume that our youth have to do whatever program it is that we have designed for them, and then everything else is sort of optional. I would love us to be able to treat our youth as we treat our adults. Go to what you're drawn to. Participate in the way that feels authentic and meaningful to you. It's not wrong. It's just maybe not what you had expected. So I think we're moving into a model where that might be more likely to occur. I just want you to be mindful of that and manage your own reactions if a youth or a number of youth don't want to participate that way. Our job as religious professionals is to help them to find a way that works for them. That's my high horse.
Thanks, Kim. We could have also titled this slide, oops, we found a soapbox. So that I wanted to actually lift up something that you said at another time in another context, which is, if any of these models don't work for you, it's not your fault. It's okay. The great thing about this work is how flexible we can be. And how we can have the freedom to try things. And last year's group of youth is not this year's group of youth. So we have to make adjustments as we go along. And just because something isn't working doesn't mean we're not doing it right. It just means we have the freedom now to try something else.
Right. And one of the challenges that will create for our staff and our volunteers is around parental expectations for our youth programs. So this is something that would need to come up in communication with parents at the start of the year. if, you know, a parent has multiple children and one of them went through the youth ministry program 5 years ago and it doesn't look exactly the same for their second kid, like bells are going off. They oftentimes want the same experience that their previous child had or that they saw happen in the congregation maybe before you were even there. So it's an opportunity to say that the values of our youth ministry, the goals of our youth ministry is the same. The means by which we bring that about for our youth might change. And that's okay. That's okay. It's all around framing.
So one thing that that I think I could have mentioned earlier is that Kim just said goals. So it's always important as we think about models that it's really about what are our goals for youth ministry, what is the mission of the congregation, and how are we enacting that through youth ministry, how are we bringing more of our values into the world through these programs, and that will allow us to have that flexibility as long as we keep focused on what's important, which is we know where we're going. We know we want to help these youth grow in spirit and in confidence and in leadership, and let's focus on that. And how we do that, well, we're going to get there.
Should we take questions, Natalie?
There you go.
Yeah. Enough from us. Well, probably not. But what has this brought up for you? What specific questions do you have for us? Please feel free to type them into the chat, and Angela will be so kind as to keep track of them and read them out for us.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you, Kim and Natalie, for the wealth of information you've shared so far on models of youth ministry and ways that we can integrate and adapt different models. It looks like we have one question that's been posed so far. Oh, it's just a question for those on the phone. If you can't see this in the chat box, to let you know that all of the slides will be available. There will also be a resource page available after this webinar, which will include links to some of the curricula and texts and other resources that the presenters shared. Is there anything else that you would like to add about what resources will be available, Kim or Natalie?
For every program or curriculum that we mentioned, I will provide the name and the link, or any books that we mentioned. All of them will give you a concise list, but also if they're all on UUA.org, and at the top of UUA.org is the magic Google box, which is how I find everything on UUA.org. So if there's something specific that you want and you haven't seen the resource list from us yet, just type it in there and it's bound to come up.
I should have also said, by way of resource, that the coming of age manual that Kim showed, it not only does it have a great small group ministry model for adults, but it also has a great mentoring program guide. So if you're looking for a way to do mentoring in your congregation, that's a good place to start.
Great, thank you so much. And there was an earlier question in the chat, which Kim answered, thank you, about the curricular resources that were mentioned. There was a question about can pieces of the curricula be used just one session instead of all 6 or 8 or 12 sessions? And so thank you, Kim, for saying yes, there are many great standalone sessions within these broader curricular frameworks. We have a few other questions coming up in the chat box. Thank you so much to those of you who've been sharing questions and comments. One question from Derby Davidson is first a comment that full integration of youth into congregational life sounds great, but the question is, how does that happen? What does that look like? Are there any tips or ideas you can share to illustrate that concept?
So I just like to start this by saying that, you know, cultural and adaptive change in congregations happens at a much slower speed than we would like. Glacial, think iceberg speed. And I would say that it starts in small steps by forming meaningful multi-generational relationships in your congregation. It also starts with the religious professionals in your congregation. So if you have a minister or a religious educator, having them in contact with the youth is really important. We know actually that one of the factors for retention of youth into the young adult years is that the minister knew my name, that I had a personal relationship with the minister. So that's really important. And then providing opportunities, fellowship opportunities, learning opportunities, small group ministry opportunities for cross-generational bonding to happen. Look, we know that people will be uncomfortable with this, and that's okay for me. I think that that's a growing edge of Unitarian Universalism in many of our congregations, and being around youth helps you be more comfortable. So let's just throw a pizza party, let's throw a dance, let's have the youth make sure that the youth are invited to the potluck, the Sunday after church brunch, and really begin to form those meaningful relationships.
I think also full integration of youth into congregational life starts when they're toddlers. Really, it starts way before their youth, and that is part of the long-term cultural change that Natalie was talking about. I don't want youth to, suddenly be a freshman in high school, and now we're going to integrate them into the life of the congregation. It should be a natural progression. It should be something that they're used to their whole lives. And as Unitarian Universalists, that's going to be a significant shift for us. So it will not be fast. It will take a lot of time. What I usually recommend to folks is pick one thing for next year, pilot it, try it, just dedicate your focus to that one thing, whatever it might be, and then build on it. And hopefully we can establish another norm for our congregations. Okay, I'll be quiet.
I could not agree with you more. And one thing we didn't address in this webinar was bridging. And I think that that's because the scope of that conversation goes beyond the scope of this webinar. Right now we're in the process, and I mean we as in association-wide, where a lot of us who are involved in youth ministry are thinking about bridging and how it's a ceremony that has been a thing unto itself, that it's been a program unto itself, and yet, as Kim said, it's actually an 18-year process. Bridging begins as soon as you're born, and we foster and grow and love and nurture children and youth throughout their entire lives, and then we mark a transition in their lives with bridging. So yeah, I had to jump on that bandwagon. I couldn't agree with you more.
Thank you so much. It looks like we've got another question and some comments that have been posed by Matthew Steinman. Thank you, Matthew, about how to balance kind of a sense of individualism and communalism. And Matthew further elaborated to say, how do you balance individual faith opportunities and providing individual pathways for each youth with the value of communal youth group activities?
That's a good question.
Okay. Well, I think that coming of age does that in a lot of respects. So in coming of age, our youth are encouraged to do a lot of individual reflection and thinking, and then they come together back into the community to have conversation and discussion about that. So they're really working on their own faith, on their own, yet within a community. So I think that would be an opportunity to really balance the individual and the communal pieces. Natalie, do you have any other thoughts for that?
I'd say that tension is a really wonderful teaching tool for covenant. So, we're people who don't gather around a creed. We gather around our promises to one another, and holding that intention. Where are my beliefs versus how am I interacting and bringing those to the group is actually a wonderful teaching moment for how do we show up here? How are Unitarian Universalists in community? How do we do this really difficult work together? Because it's not often that we are gifted with the awesome responsibility of figuring out what it is that's important to us. And then how you strike a balance with that, I think, is going to be so individualized with the groups. Some people will be very comfortable with theological reflection on their own. Some people will be very comfortable with theological reflection in a group. And so having time apart, oh my gosh, having little readings or reflections that we do between sessions can help, so that youth can discern what they know before bringing it to the group. Could be a really great tactic.
I think another way is the sharing of spiritual practices. So youth can share their own spiritual practice with the group, or if they're not sure what that even means, it might mean bringing other members of the congregation in to share their own spiritual practices with our youth. Eric Bliss, our colleague in the Pacific Western region, has put a ton of time and resources into this whole question of spiritual practices for youth. So he would be a great resource if you wanted to explore that more.
And many of his webinars are recorded and available online through the Pacific Western Region website. So if you go to that Google box and search Pacific Western Region Eric Bliss, all of his extensive material will pop up.
Great, thank you so much. Are there any other questions that anyone would like to pose in the chat box? Here is your opportunity to lift up any questions about what this webinar has brought up for you, or any comments you'd like to share with our presenters, Kim and Natalie.
I just see one more question about adding youth to membership classes at the church as part of coming of age. Deanna said congregations that they've worked for never thought of inviting them, and I don't know of any congregations that have done that either, but that would be fascinating. It would actually, to my mind, be fascinating if the youth actually presented part of the membership class. They've probably been there longer than new members, and there are some things that they might have to share with new people just joining the congregation. So there are some aspects of membership that will be the same, but there are some that the youth might be the old timers in the room. So you could really work with that, I think.
As an add-on to membership classes, when I was a religious educator in a congregation, we offered a 6-month-long sort of coming of age for new members that I taught with youth who had just graduated coming of age. So we taught it together because they had just been there, and we were hearing the feedback, of course, that you get after a youth service or after a coming of age credo service, where the adults were like, oh my gosh, they know so much more than me, and I sure wish I had that experience. And what was so great about hearing that feedback was the youth were so ready to provide that experience for adults in their congregation. It was just it was a wonderful ministry from the youth to the older years wise, but newer members of the congregation. So I think that's great that membership. I've never heard of anyone doing that. It's fantastic.
I think that's all we have for questions, Natalie. As we mentioned, we will be sharing resources with you. They will be on uua.org just as quickly as we can. And we're hoping to do webinar 2.0 next year, where we will go deeper with all of the topics that we've presented this year, including giving you discussion questions and reflection questions to use in the communities in which you serve.
So I'd like to close our amazing and holy time together with this reading from Reverend Darcy Roque, who is a minister in New Orleans, which, by the way, is where our General Assembly will be this summer. Darcy tells us, there is too much hardship in this world to not find joy every day. There is too much injustice in this world to not find the right balance every day. There is too much pain in this world to not heal every day. Each of us ministers to a weary world. Let us go forth now and do that which calls us to make this world more loving, more compassionate, more filled with the grace of divine presence every day. So thank you so much, everybody, for your amazing ministry to and with the youth of our denomination. Here, the Youth Ministry Roundtable thanks you. This is our team that has put together this slate of webinars for you over this year. It's composed of Angela, who is a member of the UCSJ staff, one member at least from every one of your field staff, your regional field staff, and then members of your national youth and young adult office. Next month's webinar, we will go even deeper into this topic of models and change in youth ministry with a panel presentation. So we'll be talking to religious educators and youth ministers who have implemented some of these models. They'll talk to us about best practices, pitfalls, things they wish they had known. It's going to be a really fun, more open discussion. And that will be May 10th at 1 p.m. Eastern and May 11th at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can register there at uua.org/mywebinars. And you can also, again, just go to Google and Google the Blue Boat blog, and all of the past webinars and the registration for the upcoming webinars is present there. So thank you so much. This webinar has been recorded and will be available just as soon as we can. And thank you again for your amazing willingness to give up an afternoon and your work and ministry to and with children and youth. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.